So, given what you said, I think it's very important that, since we're not necessarily championing toxic masculinity or not, whatever. I think it's important that, people who are listening to this don't hear us saying that you need to be emotional, you need to be weak. I think the misconception comes whenever it sounds like we're telling you not to be who you are.
Yeah.
The problem is a lot of people are not being true to who they are in the first place. That's where the problem comes, right? You find these ideas of being masculine, not everyone can fit in there.
Yeah.
You find a few guys can fit into every single one of them. Some guys don't, but the fact is not everyone fits into the stereotypical thing about being a man. Every masculine man, you find that masculine outside, there's something about him, that he doesn't like to show his other guys. It's just a normal thing. You find this guy very masculine, find him listening to Taylor Swift. What's going on? Right?
Then it becomes a guilty pleasure.
Yeah, then it becomes a guilty pleasure. So the problem is we have a model or mold, and not everyone fits into it. And what we're trying to say is look, even if you don't fit into it, you can still be yourself. And we're trying to make it acceptable for you to be who you are. And the problem with having a mode like that is you find some guys can fit into it, even if not everything about them fits into it. They still squeeze in there and act like if everything about them is masculine. Then the other guys who just cannot.
Yeah.
And then obviously then everyone can be like, okay, I'm not like that guy. Or something like that. So the idea is for people to be themselves, because you said something about people not expressing themselves. We want people to be able to express themselves. How can we do that? You can, be an example of, because I think in society it's not bad that we've got tough people and people who are self-reliant. But now if being tough and being self-reliant is now negatively impacting you, then, you need to get help. A lot of people don't do that. And we see a lot of examples of people who could have gotten help. But
yesterday, funny that you say that, yesterday I was reading a statistic which say that men, basically talking, we know that men, the is it the death rate or the minimum, the maximum age, average maximum age at which a man can live up to, I think it has a certain term to it, is much lower than the one for women.
Yeah.
And they were talking about things like suicide, and also amongst them they talked about men themselves. They say that a woman is 3 times more likely to visit a hospital than a man.
Yeah. And we discussed this too, right? Men don't like getting help.
Yeah.
We don't like it. We don't like getting help. If a guy asks for help, you best know this guy tried everything to not let it happen. And he failed. And whenever he does get help, it's like admission of failure. It's like, damn, I tried. And the problem is, it has this air of lack of competency. I tried and I'm not good enough to solve this problem.
Okay, so let's not get ahead of ourselves, because I think we'll talk about that more when we're talking about vulnerability.
We'll talk about it later on. But you're right. Guys don't typically ask for help, and women tend to be more expressive with what they're going through. So that clearly is a problem.
Okay, true there. And the other thing that we also discussed is that generally, if boys, the way they see the women around them being treated as they grow up, kind of builds an idea of how women should be treated.
Yeah.
And it's just have 1 or 2 words on that,
Yeah, it's especially as kids, we tend to imitate, what we see. And unfortunately, even the way we experience women in our lives is very important.
Yeah.
So, for example, not to say too much about it, if you read Will Smith's book, you see that his mom experienced GBV, and he was a witness to that. And that, changed his whole character. And it doesn't have to be as extreme as that. But there's just so many bad examples that kids internalize about how women are treated, how they experience women, even like how some people have relationships with women. Some men don't have healthy relationships with women in the first place. And then your relationships with the male counterparts in your life. What were they like? What did they do? What did they say was great? Did you get any examples? Because this is like a human problem, right? Like if you're treating women in a certain way, then you see women in a certain way. So how have you grown up that has skewed your perception of women in such a way that you treat them other than equals or something like that? So that's a problem.
Okay. We also wanted to discuss how as we're running down as we're running through the list of characteristics that might define or characterize toxic masculinity. We talked about some stuff, like doing household chores and stuff. And some of these stuff they shape out what we now call gender roles.
Yeah, exactly.
And so how much do you think masculinity, whether toxic or positive, is an effect on gender roles? Gender roles are basically what boys should be doing and what girls should be doing, not basically traditionally, when we look at Africa, boys are the ones who would go out and head the kettle and do all the tough chores, and the women would be home sweeping and everything like that. And
so you're asking me what role does masculinity play into, you mean forming gender roles or forming gender roles? So obviously from the personal side, I would like to say in life, first of all, you need to be who you are. And if you're in any society, you need to deliver to that society what you can best deliver, right? Regardless of what your gender is.
Okay.
If you're a guy and you're the best at cleaning the dishes, clean the dishes.
Some guy's gonna be watching this and okay.
But no, that's the reality of it, right? If you're in a society, you do the best at what you're the best at. So it's hard.
Yeah, there's positive masculinity.
Right. So I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be anything. If you're the best at being a hairstylist and you're a dude, why should you not be a hairstylist?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. You're the best at it. So obviously now, if we now go into how masculinity has, changed those things. There are some studies that show that men are better at, men are more interested in things and women are more interested in people.
Oh yeah, you said that.
Yeah, I already said that. But naturally, I'm not going to give the exact statistics, because you need to make sense of things. I don't necessarily know them. So, don't take my word for it. Go and do your own research. But, I think those things over the years are probably what resulted into gender roles being the way they are. What's wrong with them is they're rigid. It's when they become rigid. Okay, naturally, maybe men would naturally do all the heavy lifting and go outside and make all the money. And then maybe naturally, the women might be more interested in how everyone's doing and socially and, doing all that. But that's, if that's the only way it can be, then that's the problem, right? Because in reality, we don't necessarily care about what gender roles are. Right? We care about living in society so that we can give our best, like I said before. So the fact that we can classify everything is kind of irrelevant to the point. Whenever you're living life, you're doing things. You're performing to your best ability. It doesn't matter what that classifies as.
Okay.
So that's how I look at it.
Okay.
So I think that's what I can say.
If you're going to be watching this right now, if you're going to be watching this, it means that it didn't rain finally, because right now we're in a and that's how much we love you guys. We're still shooting even though it wants to rain. Okay, so let's move on to vulnerability and masculinity. I think that's probably the hot topic of the day. And and you talked about this idea of the mold, like as if like when we're making bricks, right? Like we have this mold that every brick should be this size, this shape, and this heavy, and everything. So there's basically the idea that there's this mold that exists in building men, and
exactly.
this mold is the word rigid keeps coming back,
exactly.
And this mold is rigid. It doesn't allow for flexibility. So how much does this mold have to do with men being afraid of vulnerability?
So obviously, as guys, in some ways, being a guy, I don't want to say this so it comes out wrong, feels like being in a club. Right? And I guess any group that exists of people classify themselves to be in that group, you feel validated when you do things that mean you are. You know what I mean? And
like, what's the point of being in a like golfism? They usually have a golf society or some sort of club. What's the point of being in that if you don't play golf?
It's kind of like we're together, and if you act in a certain way, then we'll identify you as
you're part of us.
No, if you do things that contradict the main ideas or ethos, that's in the group. Then you get ostracized. Now, how people get ostracized or left out, it's not like people say, you're not maybe someone might say, you're not a man anymore. But you get, looks, or people like, what? And a lot of people want to be vulnerable. But then the thing is, ideas like vulnerability, being open and talking, traditionally, those are feminine traits. So if you're living in a society where people as men are being validated and celebrated for only masculine traits. When this person comes out and he's the truth, because us as people, we're not just masculine or feminine, we're both, right? You get things from your dad, you get things from your mom. So you see, someone would do something that perhaps just comes out as a feminine trait. And I'm not even talking about being extreme, because obviously some people will go all the way to, homosexuality. You're just genuinely being vulnerable. And then it doesn't fit that mold. And then obviously people don't want to deviate from the manual. Like, hey, you're a man. Like, what's up? But how does that happen? It's just, people will ignore it. People will just, sweep it under the rug. And then you get the message that, snap, being all vulnerable here isn't the thing we do. So like, men are good at talking, but we're just not good. We can talk about sports, we can talk about things and cool stuff, movies. But when it becomes a conversation like that, then people become uncomfortable. Right?
Yeah.
People become uncomfortable. And then you get the message, like, snap. I shouldn't have brought that up, should I?
Okay, yeah, exactly. And so, let's talk about, last time I was here with Hope, she talked quite a bit on suicide. And so how much does suicide have to do with denying this vulnerability of or not being able to fit into this mold?
First of all, I would like to say that, we always talk about suppression of emotions. When we're talking about guys, we're like talking about how guys suppress their emotions, but, and then you find a lot of guys, whenever you ask them, like, yo, bro, they'll say something along the lines like, yo, I don't feel like that. And there's something called emotional repression. That's what I'm trying to get at. I don't know if I was... But what I'm trying to get at is emotional repression. What actually happens to some guys, not all of them, is because of always, it could be anything. This is not only a masculinity problem. There are also kinds of things that that are traumatic that could happen, the way you're raised, your relationship with your
and
parents.
basically, I think we should make that clear that the
Yeah.
problems or the traits that we're speaking about here are not exclusively influenced by masculinity or toxic masculinity. They might have a couple of other influences, but in this perspective that we're talking about them today, we're talking about them in it.
Yeah, I think the best way to say it is toxic masculinity is not the cause, it's like a classification.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
So the reason a guy could be acting quote unquote toxic isn't because, he's toxic and his dad is toxic per se. Could be that, he's been raised in a traumatic way and he's expressing himself in quote unquote toxic ways. There's so many things that could make a man act in quote unquote toxic ways. And it's kind of hard to generalize because we're all unique, and the reasons we do what we do are a mixture of random things that are unique to us. So I wouldn't want to go down that tunnel. But what I was trying to say is that some guys are actually emotionally repressed. Like if you asked him how he feels, he'll say, I don't know. You give him a piece of paper and a pen and you say, write down how you're feeling right now. This guy will be blank, staring you dead in the eyes and say, bro, I don't know what to write. And he's not lying.
I think this is a situation you were talking about last time where you suppress your emotions to an extent where they are no longer there.
Yeah, right.
Like that.
So you start hearing guys saying things like, I haven't cried in 10 years. But if I did cry, I don't know if I'll be able to stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And obviously we haven't even gotten to like the pressure or the unique pressures that come with being a man. Right? So imagine for 10 years, maybe this guy has been the rock of the family or something like that, and he's just been suffering in silence. So I think suicide. It's very important that guys realize it's not bad to share what's going on, because that's the thing. I feel like it's not the question of whether you should share or not. People don't even know they need to share. We live in a society where someone could be suffering and going through the worst, and to him it never even came the idea of like maybe I should get help. It wasn't even a question. Right? He's going through the worst and he never even thought of it. To him that construct doesn't exist. So I guess as guys we really need to open the bridges and being vulnerable. You can't be vulnerable to everyone. Let's be honest, right?
Whether man or woman.
Yeah, you can't be vulnerable to everyone. I mean, you're doing a self-service by picking who you're vulnerable in front of. But you need, if there are men in your life, women in your life that who care about you, you need to open the bridge to be vulnerable with what's going on, because obviously these things build up, and it depends. I don't think depression is the only thing that causes suicide, but sometimes people go through things because it's like situational depression. Sometimes it's something in your life, everything is going bad. You're failing in your class, maybe you're kicked out of university, you're almost kicked out of your rent. You haven't spoken to your family in weeks, months. Maybe your girlfriend, left you for someone else. It's like everything else in your life is falling apart.
Okay, quick question. Okay, just going back a bit. You talked about the pressures associated with being a man.
Yeah.
And I believe some of these pressures are a result of men feeling like they have to be, to be honest, growing up as a man, you're taught to be responsible, that you're going to have a family, and that whether your family has something to eat on the table or not is totally a result of you. Like it's all on you.
It's all on you.
So do you think that we can ever make change to the toxicity in some of these masculine traits without looking at how roles in a family are perceived? Like, do you get where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you're asking me, like, excuse me, what influence does gender roles have on toxic masculinity? A lot. Definitely a lot. Because as a man, you know, as being a man in a way, the issue with when things become toxic is because masculine is trying to separate itself from being feminine. You know, that's the issue. But I think gender roles do influence that. So I don't know which one is which. Is it being masculine that influences the gender roles, or your gender roles? But obviously, as a masculine man, you want to fulfill all the masculine gender roles available to you. And obviously, gender roles go beyond just in the household, right? You know, even in society, the way you behave outside, and you know the way what people expect of you. So I think they're very interlinked, and I don't think they can go without each other.
Okay.
You know, if we could change the roles, then you know we wouldn't be having this conversation. I don't think so, because I guess actually the best way to say it is really the roles are like a manifestation of, you know, the way we see it is the roles are a manifestation of being masculine or being feminine. Well, take that for what it's worth, because it means, I mean, that's how I think we see it. Right? If you're doing feminine things, then you must be feminine. Which is, I mean, everyone is kind of feminine and masculine.
You know,
so it shouldn't be exactly an insult.
You know, we're talking about it that you know, the thing. Okay, you know, Barack Obama at one time, you know, he says in one of his books that I think he was about 12 or 13, and he said he's reached a stage where he can choose to be exactly the same as his father, or he can choose to take his father's character and rip it apart and take what he needs from it, or he can choose to be totally different and choose to be bitter against who his father or something like that.
Okay.
So, you know, I think last time we were talking about, you know, how as men, when we look at our fathers, they're basically the idea of, we praise them. And, you know, they're basically the idea of, so we might not see as much toxicity in them as, you know, we praise them, and point blank, that's really who we want to be. And, whilst on the other hand, some of the best characteristics that we have, some of the best traits that we have are, you know, split in half. You know, you've got some of the best traits that you could see in a man, some of them are from the mother, some of them are from the father. And, you know, when we look at it, we don't look at it that way, you know.
So, in general, as kids, you know, you grow up and, you know, you're like your parents decide